Here we are. What's up? Let's get right into this, man. As you see the title, Demartravion Reed, the second one that I did. So if you didn't hear the first part of this, I suggest, or if you don't know what's going on, then this is a good time for you to catch up on a little bit of news that may have been overshadowed in the last couple of weeks over here. And the gentleman whose name is he goes by Trey Reed. So this was in the news maybe a couple weeks ago. And if you don't remember, let me just backtrack here, put this up because we're going to visit this in just about a minute here too. Shout out to Willie D. I've had my criticisms of Willie D previously, but once in a while he does drop a good interview. He knows how to do a great interview. I remember when Kid and Play was up there and he was interviewing and they were like, dude has no notes. He's going to interview us, and he held it down for like the 2 hours. But anyway, not taking away from him, very intelligent man. And once in a while, I guess when you're in that stratosphere, you got to take some of this and some of that, and then once in a while you get some of the real deal. So anyway, let's get back into what I was saying over here. So we know this gentleman, we're going to refer to him as Trey, though his name is Demartravion Reed. He went by Trey. Now, just for a reminder, you didn't see my video from a couple weeks ago when this was happening, because it definitely seemed like the news was heightened back then, of course, with Charlie Kirk and multiple school offings within those few days. And then since then, a little back and forth of things going on too that happened in the media, right? But there may be some new things that we've discovered through this. So if you guys don't remember, this young gentleman was 21 years old, freshman in college, and barely a month in at his time at Delta State University in Mississippi. Boy, something still stinks in Mississippi. He was found September 15th. Within 8 hours of that, the campus police told the press that there was no evidence of foul play. This echoed all along all the news channels, everything, that there was absolutely no foul play, and they stuck to that. Let me read a little bit more and they were certain, by the way. That's what you should know about that. They were sure that it was due to self-harm. Everybody from local enforcement to state enforcement ruled it a self-offing, right? Now, one thing we should be wary of, especially from authorities that don't look like some of the people that they're representing, is the complacency, the type of quick work. It could remind you of Kendrick Johnson or anybody else who we know there was more details involved, and the authorities' quickness to sort of dismiss anything else, but not only to dismiss, but to control the narrative of what may or may not have happened so quickly. And we know in a place like Mississippi, people are automatically going to tie it, to Jim Crow eras, to when things were not fair, when the Klan and, quite frankly, the demographic had lawlessness and could do anything they want. Yeah, there are still remnants of that stuff. Now, Sean Tyndall, who is the commissioner, praised the quick work of the local officials, condemned what they called rumors of circulating regarding Reed's death. In a follow-up statement, this person was more blunt. He said, "We haven't had a documented case of lynching in decades. So when somebody jumps to that conclusion, I would believe that they're just trying to get clickbait and get you to come look at their stuff. Or they just want a more reasonable answer." When they finally got around to posting the social media message about Reed 4 days after his death, Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves struck a similar tone. In a tweet, he labeled Reed's death a tragedy. Reeves also criticized those allowing things like history and collective memory to cloud their thinking. I know a lot of speculations from people who have no facts or evidence has dominated online conversations and even national mainstream media outlets in the immediate aftermath of this tragedy. Now, I can't even agree with that. If this were things that were true, and of course, I haven't heard all the media, all the news. I try to stay objective with the news as it pours in. I'm a grown, educated man. I like to wait, but don't label suspicions as people leading anybody. Nobody's coming out with stuff. Well, there are some things that by the way, in the background, while I had mentioned Willie D, the person sitting there next to Willie D is the chairman of the new Black Panther Party, and she's really been on this case. Boots to the ground, her, the mother as well of Reed. There's a couple things. I'm just going to play a couple minutes in this interview. It's about an hour and a half long that these two discuss the case here. If you're looking in the background, Willie D and the chair lady herself, chairwoman, I should say. Um, I'll get to that in just a moment. I promise. Um, I where we're at, blaming people to have a suspicion, especially at an even more heightened time. We know what was going on in the media with this Kirk person, people going back and forth, HBCUs being threatened, groups actually s- going into and agitating the grounds of HBCUs as well. You know, if you want to talk about clickbait, well, that's that. All right. Anyway, let's continue. Nobody, including myself, just as a thinking human being, were not satisfied with the initial autopsy made in haste. They wiped their hands clean. No, nothing's here, you know. Conflicting views, saying he was told the family he was found in his dorm room when actually he was found hanged from a tree. So a lot of these things are very crazy. So I'm just going to play this for a brief second so you see the tone and the information. Nothing angry here. This is just questions, and people should be allowed to question just because this is 2025 and we're still getting the runaround like it's 1945, 40, 1920, 1930, 1900s, 1950s, 60s, before that, when other people were running rampant with it. Here we go with a piece of this.
What was the single most damning piece of evidence that proved this?
Well, the most damning proof evidence is the fact that this young man was placed the way he was placed in a hung position, in which we actually do have the pictures. You know what I'm saying? But we are respecting the request of the family, to not reveal it at the moment. But we knew what we were looking into because there's been a series of lynchings going on in Mississippi that have not been.
Now, I'll remind you while this is on, there was a white male found hanging from a tree, I believe, as well, around the same time frame. But obviously, she's talking about hanging of Black people still in Mississippi, the ones that don't actually make the news. And that's very important that we got to remember. Even though whatever makes the news represents, and I don't even know how many percentage of what actually doesn't even make the news. So she's saying the pictures that were taken, the initial pictures when they found him untouched, as I guess you want to say evidence, he was found in a very suspicious manner. All right. And when I play this, I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'll just mention a couple
Exposed
other
to the
things.
national light or even got due justice. Now, with this case, last night, I did talked to Trey Reed's mother, Miss Sophia Reed, and she was very upset. We have been on the ground several times. When I'm saying we, the members of the New Black Panther Party, other community members, other community leaders, concerned people doing independent investigations, fact finding into what actually happened with Trey, and hitting the ground. The majority of the people know the truth about what's going on, and so and
Isn't it interesting that organizations and individuals have to do the job of the state and the city, the county? With a history like Mississippi, you would think all the so-called authorities would open the books and say, hey, we're going to look into this. We know it might look suspicious. We're going to open all the books. We're going to exhaust all the resources so that we, not even to come up with an answer that satisfies you, but the most logical answer backed up by evidence, real evidence. It's such a shame that they are not going to do the job necessary because they tell you don't go by the past, but you have to because things are still being done as though it is the past. So what are you supposed to do?
there's a lot of people that are witnesses. There are a lot of people who have very relevant information about what took place, but the so-called authorities, the police department, the sheriff department, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations, have not only dropped the ball, but they're complicit in an absolute cover-up. At this point, they're part of a conspiracy to cover up a murder, as it stands. Now, speaking with the mother last night, and I heard.
But have you ever heard of an investigation that the so-called authorities kind of brushed off and did away with, come back and say, we were wrong? I think that's part of, if this is a conspiracy, that's part of that, because there's no peeling that back. Now, the work of the so-called authorities is to go ahead and push that narrative that nothing suspicious happened. In other words, make me do it. So it doesn't matter about the evidence and stuff. And I'm going to take this off. If you want to, of course, it's Willie D's website or his channel. Go ahead and check this out. Like I said, I think it's about an hour to an hour and a half long of this conversation. Some very interesting things come up. And I'm just going to move this along and tell you a couple things because we're going to end this soon. You know, it's the video. We do this once a week. It's about 10, 15 minutes, so I don't want to go longer than that. But she will go on and state, the chairwoman would go on and state that at the funeral, that was only just a few days ago, they could see that there was blunt force trauma to Trey's head. There are reports coming out that both legs were broken. Now, the initial autopsy will tell you, oh man, he was pristine condition. He did that to himself. So obviously now if there's two broken legs, if there's stuff that happened, that is not necessarily the crime scene. Now you got to ask for other causes of death. Now you got to ask who else is involved in this. After you do all that, then you're going to have to investigate why the cover-up and who is responsible for the cover-up and the purpose for covering up such a thing. One thing I want to note with this, yes, Ben Crump is the lawyer. For those of you who give people like Ben Crump shit, fine, get somebody else to represent the case. He does it because he's the guy right now, and hopefully he has the resources, which we know that he does. He will be thorough with the case. He brings these cases national attention. And while we're talking about national attention, let's give some to Colin Kaepernick. who most of you during the Black Lives Matter movement started shitting on them when it didn't work for you about money, this and that, forgetting what the purpose was, bringing these things to highlight and why Kaepernick took a knee in the first place. Kaepernick has an initiative which is funding the independent autopsy for Trey Reed. So they're getting a second one. And some of the things that I'm hearing, I'm holding back on some information because it's so scarce. All right. When you look online, nobody's really coming out. None of the so-called professionals are coming up to back this stuff. But I'm trusting the chairwoman here because she says she has boots on the ground, has no reason to lie. Obviously, she's going to have to back up all the evidence and everything that she puts forth here. But all these things are coming together because of the movements, because of some of the sacrifices that we've had just a few short years ago when the country, again, was riled up over racial incidents. Now, this isn't to separate anybody, but just as a human being, black, white, whatever the case is here, for you to put on your thinking caps as a human being and just start asking questions. What would a freshman a month into their college life say goodbye to the family, go in on moving day, just met the classes? What reason would they have to end their life? Now, you know, you could fill that question with many, 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 many answers. But again, you could open the situation to many, many different possibilities rather than just close a case and say, nothing's weird over here. So when we hear from people that were actually there, you know, I've been to a couple funerals. I've seen a few bodies in my day. You know, only a few traumatic things would be able to cause disfigurement to the body. None of those, by the way, self-deletion, a hanging. So that's what makes it very suspicious to me. So we have to wait for these facts to officially come out. But not that I'm hoping for different news. We're hoping for the real news. And when the case of a second autopsy comes out, and people are already saying things like, and I'm not going by social media, we already know to be smarter than that. Wait for the facts, wait for the autopsy to come out officially. And thank God we have the resources to be able to do things like this as well. But again, something stinks in the state of Mississippi. What is going on? Will Trey Reed get justice? Does he need justice? Is there more? I have no choice to believe that there might be more to this story than they are telling, and why there might be a cover-up. So let's follow this thing along, as I said I would about 2 weeks ago when I dropped the video, that if there's a little bit more to it, we would. The only reason I'm reporting this now because it looks like there might be more evidence pointing to something suspicious. And amongst all the things happening, we need transparency and we need answers, not as black, white, Democrat, Republican, but as human beings who may have sent your child off to college. See, the worst part of this is not getting the answer. You can't even properly begin to grieve unless you're sure of all the facts. When all the facts are at the table, you have to deal with it one way or another. Either something suspicious happened or it didn't happen. Well, then a mother, a family, a community could grieve that child, that man. He's 21, but I'm an older dude. 21's a child to me. And that's all we're asking here. So a message has to be sent. Don't handle these things in haste. Keep options open, especially when you have a history, a shitty, dirty Mississippi history. to prevent anything from being solved. Hopefully, by the time I do a Trey Reed III, we have some more real answers. But this sort of stuff can't get buried in the news because that's exactly what happens. You get what you know, a year, 2 years down the road. Well, what happened was it? The problem with this is that it's showing to be, and it's going to be, an uphill battle just to get the answers they should have had available to them from the first day. But again, being black in America, you don't get those answers. On top of the situation, on top of the grieving, the death, the suspicion, the threats, you're still looking for answers. The body's buried. They had the funeral a few days ago. You can't begin to grieve unless you have the answers. So let's help these people. Let's help this community get answers. You have anything, any thoughts, please hit the comments and do me a favor, man. Like, share, subscribe. This is Last Call Reacts, the one video I do a week. Hit me up on the live on Friday at 9 p.m. I will see you there where we discuss a whole bunch of other stuff. Man, be good to yourself. Be good to other people. Last Call is out. Peace.